Good morning. It is May 7th, 2015. I am Nancy Becker at the Eagleton Institute of Politics with Michele Kent, formerly Gould, who was Commissioner of Human Services, Deputy Commissioner of Human Services, Director of the Division of Youth and Family Services, and Deputy Chief of Staff in the Whitman administration. We are here to continue our series of conversations on the Whitman administration for the Center on the Ameircan Governor. Good morning, Michele.
Good morning, Nancy.
Let's start by asking you to tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to college and graduate school?
Oh my goodness, okay. Grew up in a log cabin. I was born in upstate New York, near the Finger Lake area. And my father was in the military, so we tended to move around a goodly amount, up and down the East Coast only, as it were. So I sort of always started school in the middle of the year, which was upsetting at the time, but I seemed to have survived. And I went to college, undergraduate to Drew University, where I majored in philosophy. And I have a master's from William Patterson in communications. And I was very lucky to be awarded an honorary doctorate from Drew. So that was a lovely moment.
That's terrific. So tell us a little bit about your family.
I'd love to. I have two grown sons, one on each coast, which is good news and bad news. So they are each married. One works for the Office of Legislative Services here in New Jersey and has two darling little girls. And the other is a financial planner in LA, and he has almost two girls, one and the second on the way. So I have four little princesses. I will.
You're very lucky.
I am.
Tell us about the beginning of your career, the inception of your career. How did you start out, and what did you do?
I'm the epitome of the unplanned life and the unplanned career, specifically. I didn't read enough of What Color is My Parachute or whatever those books were at the time to try to plan my life. And because I was a philosophy major, I was always drawn to everything. So, you know, I thought I wanted to be this one day and something else the next day. So at some point, I landed inadvertently, I'm unplanned again, working for United Way locally in New Jersey. And looking back, that was very fortuitous because I started to get very familiar with the nonprofit human services world in that position. And I worked myself up there and became the number two. I then went to county government in Mercer County, where I became Director of Human Services. I then went to the Senate and was Director of Operations.
I'm going to stop you, and I'm going to ask you some more questions as we go forward. So tell me, did you become interested in politics when you were working for United Way?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. First of all, we were asked not to be politically active at the time in United Way, given the scope of all the fundraising efforts they did, or at least not very visibly. And to be quite candid, I had no knowledge of or particular interest in politics at the time.
How and when did you begin your work at the county level in Mercer County? Then somebody who was not so interested in politics, et cetera.
Right, right. That's really an unusual story, I think. Because of my human services United Way experiences, I was asked to sit on a number of different committees that were county committees, and the county executive at the time heard about me. When an opening came up in the Department of Human Services there, he offered it to me. And I will tell you how politically naive I was. I did not know what a freeholder was. No idea. So I've learned a lot since then.
So describe your job at the county level. Tell us what you did, and clearly you became involved in politics because the county at that time was controlled by Republicans.
It was. Well, yes, and I may not have known anything about it, but I'm pretty much a quick study. So it became quite obvious that becoming active in politics would be good, and I was very happy to do that, to be honest. I mean, I worked for a very liberal Republican, the county executive, Bill Mathesius, and so that was very, comported very well with human services issues. And there, it was just a microcosm, much, much more micro, of what I became at the state level, where I oversaw a department that had ran the gamut of human service.
So how did the experience, first of all, how long did you work at the county level? And then how did that experience lead you to a position at the state level then?
Well, I'm going to be a little vague about how long I was at the county. I know I was at United Way for 7 years, the county less than that, but 5 maybe, not positive. So what happened is the county executive had served 2 terms and then wasn't running, and someone else won necessarily and became the county executive. And what I learned, another quickly learned lesson, is that even if the same party comes in, you don't necessarily stay, because people at the top, and I did the same thing as I moved up, want to bring in their own team. So though another Republican won at Mercer County, the county executive level, it was made very clear to me that I would not be Human Services Director anymore. And working through the network, at the same time I was working up through the political structure, and I had become the treasurer for the Republican Party in Mercer County. So, you know, all those connections I'd been developing over the years led me to get a job in the Senate Majority office, and the Senate Majority at the time was, again, Republican.
And tell us about what was your role in the Senate office?
Yes, well, that was quite a novel experience for me. You know, first of all, I hadn't ever worked supporting the legislative branch. So I worked, was a complete component of staff for both the minority and the majority offices. Donald DeFrancesco was the Senate president at the time. My position had nothing to do with human services, so I will be candid, and I floundered a bit because it wasn't my comfort zone. But I was director of operations, so a lot of the details of how things happen and move in the legislative process for that office I handled.
Okay, then, and then were you involved in Christy Whitman's campaign for governor?
No, I did not know her at all. I was not involved in any gubernatorial campaign, and people tend not to believe that I could have risen where I have without having any involvement with the Whitman campaign. But frankly, I think that speaks to her strengths, which later on maybe you and I can touch on a bit. But the chief of staff at the time for Governor Whitman was Judy Shaw, and she was looking for a deputy for herself, deputy chief of staff, and she heard about me, frankly. And then the rest, so you know, the rest is history, as they say.
So when did you finally meet Governor Whitman?
Well, she had been in office only a few months when Judy Shaw interviewed me. So it was not, and I had a very high-end real estate once I went in the governor's office. So actually, my office had the back entrance to the State House that the governor would use to go in and out quietly. So, like it or not, I saw her all the time. I had to keep my feet off the desk for sure.
Well, wasn't that her escape route?
It was her escape route. She used it liberally.
Yes. When the troopers used to wonder where she was.
Yeah, when she was in disguises and such. Yes.
Right.
Great sense of humor.
Right. So what was it like to work for the first woman governor and the first woman chief of staff?
It was a thrill, and I mean that honestly. You know, I walked into that position, and I think a lot of women, probably more than men, and hopefully less so today than it used to be when I was there, tend to be insecure about new positions. So I walked in having no idea what was going to be happening, what exactly I'd be involved with, and I found myself working for some very, very strong, bright women. And I had come in the Senate, it was a very male-dominated world. So it was quite a change, and frankly, a very, very refreshing one.
When Judy Shaw resigned, because she did not remain chief of staff beyond about 1.5 years, I believe. So when she resigned, and there was a new chief of staff. I think it was Peter Venera.
It was, yeah.
How did your position change, or did it change?
It did change significantly. Excuse me, and it speaks to what I was saying earlier, whenever there's a change at a high level. So Peter Venera did become chief of staff when Judy resigned, and you know, he was very open with me that he wanted his own deputy. So I was kept, but sort of shuffled to another office and to a lesser role. And you know, the fates aligned for me because the Human Services Commissioner, Bill Wallman, certainly knew me, had known me at the county level, and he had an opening as deputy. So he called me up one day and said, Michele, and he didn't know I was not particularly thrilled with my new situation, and he asked if I'd be interested in becoming deputy commissioner to him, and if he could approach the governor in that.
Okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
Right, I was going to ask you that question. So what was your responsibility then as Bill's deputy, and did you replace somebody, or was it a new position?
I replaced somebody who had left. And, you know, that department, it is now 2 departments in New Jersey, but it was huge, massive. So it was structured at the time with 2 deputies, each of whom sort of oversaw certain divisions. I had mental health, and I had DIFUS, and I had a number of other developmental disabilities. And then another deputy commissioner oversaw Medicaid and welfare.
Okay. Who was the other deputy commissioner at the time?
Velvet Miller.
Okay. And so, but sometime after that appointment, I believe that there was a huge scandal around DIFUS, or
Correct.
Department of
Youth and Family
Services,
right?
Yeah. Which I want you to talk about a little. Bill asked you to step in as director to really fix the problem.
Right.
So tell us what it was like in that very difficult situation, correcting the problem, and what that assignment was really like.
Well, as you can imagine, any state's child welfare system is, you know, fraught with issues and can easily devolve managerially. The intractable social problems that you're dealing with make it very, very hard to protect these young, innocent lives. And so it's not unusual to have some very horrific incidents, and they seem to come in waves. And DIFUS, Division of Youth and Family Service in New Jersey, was experiencing one of those valleys where the lot was happening that shouldn't have been happening, with good case management and a good organizational structure. And the commissioner, Bill Wallman, talked to me, and we decided that the DIFUS director would be terminated. So he asked me to go in and fix it. I remember very well the day he asked me. It was at the end of the day. He asked me to step into his office. I assumed, per the normal procedure, they'd be doing a national search. So he asked me to come and talk to him, and I did, and he said, be sure you're sitting down. He said, I'd like you to go in and run DIFUS. And I think I audibly gasped because I knew what a difficult assignment that would be. And frankly, I think I said to him, I don't really know anything about the nuts and bolts of child welfare. And he just said, oh, you're quick study, you'll figure it out. So I remember we were getting ready for a press conference where Bill was going to announce that I was going to come in and fix DIFUS. And I thought to myself, boy, he needs to pick someone younger because I can't live long enough to fix that place.
And wasn't didn't the issue come to a head because of a lawsuit?
Well, there was a major lawsuit. I believe that the lawsuit was in the process before I was sent over there. One of these class action big suits, yeah.
So how did you fix DIFUS?
Well, you know, I like to pride myself on being a manager. And so regardless of the product, whether it's child welfare or some other end product, protecting children or doing something else, for me, the principles of good management always remain the same. So I went over there and talked to the team and got my own personal sense of what was going on. Brought in some of my people that I had worked with in the larger department, my favorites, as it were. And the governor made it very clear that she would like me to give her a plan. So indeed, we put together, after a lot of interviews and quiet discussions with the workforce, with the bargaining units, with management, with external advocacy groups for children, to really get a sense of where and how it was broken. So we developed a plan that really tried to address all of those things, because not enough caseworkers or not enough cars or poor structure, at the end of the day, it's not just about employees, it's about children. And we had, I believe at the time, 55,000 children under supervision.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So it's very important to do all you can to protect them. So at any rate, we produced a plan, and I trotted it over to the governor, not quite that cavalier, but, and her chief of planning and policy. And this is something over and over again I saw with Governor Whitman, so I'll say it now and I'll probably repeat it. She was so willing to look at pretty, not radical, but innovative solutions to issues that, for me, it always became quite easy in that sense to get her okay. So we had put together a very multifaceted fix, as it were. And it was a different time economically, so in all fairness, there was some money available in the state budget, and all the fixed components had a cost attached to them. So all she did for me, she approved the whole plan, but she asked that I stretch it out over a couple of years. So we started to implement at all different levels, internally, externally, what we thought would help ameliorate the situation.
Did you have pushback internally from employees and external groups?
Yes, all of the above, of course. You know, well, they didn't know me. So there was that whole public relations effort I had to make going across the state. I was not a social worker. I didn't have that kind of background, which made me very suspect in their minds of a lot of people, I think. And when you're dropped in at the top of an organization, that never feels very good. It's very threatening to the staff. So it took a lot of listening over and over, meetings internally, externally, with bargaining groups, and meetings where I'd have, you know, hundreds of screaming DIFAS employees, you know, and you just have to listen. And I always had someone with me who would dutifully taking notes on all the issues and trying to separate the emotion from the reality of real problems. So.
And how did you feel at the end of your time as DIFAS director? Did you feel that you'd made a difference? Did you feel it was better?
I thought we were on the right track. Yeah.
If I recall, you really got some good public praise for your efforts at the time.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. And the editorial boards were kind to me, and we started to make some real positive. I don't think you could ever fix a system totally that's just dealing with such tough stuff, but you can certainly do all you can to make it better.
Then in 1998, Bill Waldman decided to resign, and you were appointed Commissioner of Human Services. Tell us how that happened, and I want you to talk about your responsibilities as Commissioner.
Well, that's pretty much how it happened. Bill decided to resign, and that's sort of always been, when you're in all these appointed positions, you know you have no job security, which for me, with my personality, it just fit. I didn't over-worry that. But so suddenly I knew things were going to change big time. Either I'd be on the street or somewhere else. I knew my name was in the hopper to be considered for commissioner. And seemed to take forever from where my vantage point, waiting to know. And in fact, the governor did appoint me. And if people have not gone through a three-way check with the state police and the FBI and all of that, it's quite
Tell us a little bit about it. I don't think we've talked to anyone about that procedure.
Well, you are assigned, one is assigned a state police detective that oversees your three-way, and I forget quite what three-way stands for, but it's the different levels of law enforcement or security that are going to investigate you. And you fill out a questionnaire that just seems to be like the size of an encyclopedia. And of course, for me, with all moving around my entire childhood, and they want to know exact dates when you moved, and I had no clue, and I was guessing, and they wanted to know who your teachers were from elementary school, and but anyway, I did my best. And what I found, and then names of your friends, and names of this and that, names of your doctor, and in fact, they checked all of that because people I knew, friends would call me up and say, you know, I got this strange phone call about you. So it's, you really feel like you're going through your most personal drawers of your lingerie, you know, or something like that, because they are finding out just about everything they possibly can. So it's disconcerting.
So you became commissioner in 1998. There were significant achievements in human services during the time that Bill Waldman was commissioner, that you were deputy, that you were commissioner. So tell us what your responsibilities were, and then I want you to talk about your challenges and your accomplishments.
Okay. Well, as I said, Nancy, this was a huge department. So, you know, and the key is with management of so much to keep everything moving a little bit, you know, keep all the balls up in the air. And so it becomes critical that you have a top echelon team of managers reporting to you, because many of those deputies under me or directors ran entities of mental health that were larger than all the other state governments, you know. So the scope of it, this would, you know, there were 18,000 employees. There was over $7 billion budget. So you have to have confidence in your top people. And I made sure I did, you know, either through just getting to know them well or making a couple of changes. So, but that's a time when welfare reform was going on, when kid care, which became family care, a subsidized health insurance program for children that then evolved in New Jersey to also being for their parents. And by the way, New Jersey had the most generous program in the country. All of those things were starting to happen. And it was also the time because Human Services, I think I had 13 institutions under the scope of my responsibility, either psychiatric hospitals or centers for developmentally disabled. And those were the days where people were becoming more and more aware that we didn't need big institutions anymore. There were more enlightened ways to care for all of these individuals, either because there were better psychotropic medications or just better knowledge of how to care. And the country was moving toward shutting institutions, putting residents in group homes, much more personal environment. So that was all going on as well. And Bill had closed one institution, and there was always all the many challenges of trying to do that with families, with employees, with bargaining units. So that was another big spike of concern. And then we had DIFAS going, you know, through this
Who
change.
replaced you at DIFAS when you moved up to commissioner?
It was Charlie Venti, who was one of my deputies when I was there. Yeah.
So what would you say, what were your most significant accomplishments during the time that you were there?
That's easy for me. That one's easy because what became my frontispiece, what I cared most about, I had listened for a number of years at all those positions for human services at the state level to how fragmented the child serving system was. And that in fact, especially for children with behavioral health issues and serious behavioral health issues, what they were offered for care and programs depended on what door they entered, what part of their mega bureaucracy they showed up at. So if they came through DIFAS, there would be DIFAS contracts of what they could do. If they showed up in mental health, there would be those contracts and what that could do and all the regs of that funding for those contracts. So you had this times maybe 8, including children whose problems manifest at schools and how you were going to. So you had a system with all these children with behavioral health problems getting different kinds of care. Some a lot better than others, and certainly nothing coordinated. So I don't, you know, one day I just had one of these probably fits of frustration, and I thought, well, that's it. That's it. We have to do something totally different. Now, but having spoken about the size of this bureaucracy, I knew that this was going to be probably my toughest challenge, because to do something different meant I wiped out everything and, you know, tabula rasa, just started with a clean slate. Now, to do that, to be honest, I couldn't just decide to do this. It was much too massive in scope. So, of course, I designed with a team after a lot of effort, a different way to deliver services for children with mental health, with behavioral health issues. Took it to the governor and her team, and it was approved. Now, when I said this governor had tremendous courage, that she would listen and make a balanced decision, but she would always, if she believed in it, take the riskier decision, she did. And this, what we developed in New Jersey, it was the first time it was ever done in the country. It was statewide. It was just unheard of, frankly, where, and I won't go into the myriad pieces of this thing, but when I talked about all those separate pockets of contracts and money and control, span of control, I sort of did this to all my directors who were not happy, and took all of their contract money and all of their contracts and put it into Medicaid, and without going into all that, because I could push it into Medicaid, we were able to claim federal dollars, dollar for dollar, so that doubled the scope of money we had. We were able to develop a whole lot more services and programs for these children. And then, so, you know, we had this octopus of all these different stovepipes, where at the end of this system, regardless of where a child showed up, he and his situation would all feed to one central management point, which would do care coordination and decide what he needed. And so it didn't matter if you were at DIFAS when someone noticed that you were having tremendous problems and DIFAS was out of money for that kind of service, because it all filtered down into this one.
So, and that was one of the public-private partnerships also that happened during the Whitman administration, that in some ways she was criticized for, right, and there was pushback on it. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes, when you do the public-private cooperative agreements, they often make sense on paper, and then when you try in government to implement them, you do get a lot of pushback. You get just a human pushback of people who are threatened, you know, about the change or loss of jobs or this or that. You get often a lot of bargaining unit pushback because of the obvious fears that it somehow would result in fewer, a smaller state labor force, that kind of stuff. Things that make sense on the outside often are very difficult to implement and get political will. And a lot of governors and other elected people frankly collapse in those circumstances. The pressure becomes so strong that maintaining that resolve is very difficult. Governor Whitman maintained the resolve. It was very key that we had an outside organization that did this centralized case management, and a lot of pushback ensued from that with the unions, and the legislature got involved, and there was a lot of screaming and gnashing of teeth and that kind of thing.
So talk a little bit about this in terms, this was toward the end of the Whitman administration, and your greatest achievement almost became a defeat.
An abysmal failure, right.
So talk a little bit about that.
Well, again, because timing is everything, as all of this was starting to really take hold in terms of developing this new system, children's system of care, the governor decided she was going to leave her office a year or so early. But we were going forward with everything, that was fine. And so the incoming, we had a Senate president in New Jersey. The structure is if there's an interim period, the Senate president becomes the acting governor. There was no lieutenant governor at the time. And at the same time, I knew that I probably would be leaving as commissioner. So I was starting to look for other positions. So it all got a little complicated to keep a straight course with this children's system of care. And I started coming under a lot of pressure to kill it, frankly. And each time I would dutifully go to the governor and say, Senator this one or another, whatever, want it ended. And she would say, no, just hang tough.
This is before she left.
This was before she left. She had her bags packed,
right.
though. It was right near the end. And even the incoming the Senate president, who was incoming to the position, wasn't so thrilled to have something this controversial to walk into when he was going to assume leadership of the state. So I had that pressure as well.
Because he was, my recollection is acting Governor DeFrancesco wanted to run for governor when he assumed that position, and he was particularly responsive to the public employee unions, right, who were among the greatest critics of this program.
Right. Well, that was the irony and the desperation when you're running for office, right? You just don't want to risk losing any vote, right, even if you never would have had it. So you're right. He of course did want, it was well known, wanted to become governor. He knew that the unions hated this program. His people kept coming to me asking me to change it and not have this outside contract. And I really bent over backward to try to maintain the integrity of the program, but appease things. And there was the irony of, that labor was not going to vote for you anyway. I didn't say that to him, but I was thinking it at the time.
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
So in addition to the children's system of care, there were some very, very significant achievements in human services during the Whitman administration. From your perspective, what were they?
Well, I touched on kid care and family care, and I think that was, as I say, we were the most comprehensive program in the nation at the time. Under Bill, before me, but I was there, welfare reform was rolling out. And this was where a limit on how, because even Bill Wallman, my predecessor as commissioner, who had gone up the ranks as a beloved social worker, and everybody felt very comfortable with his decisions, but he had started at the county level and recognized that the well-intentioned, which is often the case with public policy, it's well-intentioned, the well-intentioned welfare program really had resulted in generations of dependency. So it really wasn't helping lift people out of their situation. So you're going to now put a lifetime limit on how long someone could collect welfare. So certainly that was tremendously controversial, and it was, a national program. So but that was a big, difficult deal to get through.
Now, were you responsible for working with the legislature on any of these issues?
Well, you know, New Jersey, as most people know, has the strongest governorship in the country. So I think that made it easier for the cabinet to do things once the governor's office approved them. And of course, we wanted to keep the legislature apprised and happy and understanding where we were going. And you know, I had a lot of government relations staff under me that would keep that happening. So I didn't have a lot of direct interaction. And this governor, I will also say, not related to legislative interaction per se, but she was a very, she gave us a lot of rope to do what we needed to do. It was not a command central, get approval for everything that you need to do. If she trusted you, she felt generally good about you, you know, she let you go. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't used to get calls regularly when there was some death at a psych hospital or something like that, but you know, that was the nature of the business of that department.
Who did you work with in the governor's office while you were commissioner and deputy commissioner?
Mostly Eileen McGinnis. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was chief of policy and planning, if that's the exact title, I'm not sure. Right. But generally, that's where I had the most interaction.
And did you work with counsel's office at all, or did you work through Eileen with counsel's office?
We had, see, again, because of the scope of this department, we had a whole group of attorneys in the department, many, and they would work with counsel's office.
Interesting. So how was the Whitman administration able to achieve enactment of these really controversial issues? What is very interesting is to look at a Republican governor really making dramatic changes in human services policies over a 7-year period, let us say. So how was she able to do that? The environment clearly was so different than it is today.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes to the strength and the personality of the woman in this case. You know, she did a lot of things that initially rattled legislative leadership because she wasn't playing quite by the established rules. And this was not part of the old boy network. Not only was she a woman, but her top people, many of them, were women. So this stirred a lot of emotion and angst. She, you know, has a firm but soft, that's an oxymoron, but gentle touch but very firm. So she always listened well, I thought, but was just not afraid to make a calm, strong decision. And, you know, I didn't know her well when I started, as you pointed out. But I remember when I became deputy commissioner, going with her to different events that the Department of Human Services had, things like visiting kids in foster homes or other difficult things to see. And even though I knew her pretty well, I didn't know where she stood on all these human service issues. And I could watch her interact with children in foster care or in group homes or other settings. And I was delighted to see her humanness and her femaleness, if that doesn't sound too sexist, come through. But human services is all about caring for vulnerable populations. And let's face it, this woman had a reputation as being, you know, from a very, very blue blood background, very financially comfortable, to say the least. So there was a fear, you know, that she would just not be able to relate. And in human services, can you relate to the poor and the downtrodden? And let me tell you, she could relate. I watched her relate, and I watched her melt with some of the situations. And that's when I knew that I had someone I was working for who would understand.
That's great. Now you've already begun this, but tell us what you felt. What were Governor Whitman's greatest strengths?
Well, I thought she knew how to delegate very, very well. She knew how to listen very well. And I'll tell you, to anyone who thought she was going to be a pushover, she was not, you know. She would listen fairly and quietly, but she was just fearless in terms of making the difficult decision, the politically unpopular decision oftentimes. And she was able to change her mind, to listen, and you could see her sort of grow, I thought, into the position of becoming just stronger and stronger as a governor in terms of her skill set. But I really attribute, I mean, this is a bright woman, let's face it. So, but there are a lot of bright people. But she just had a style and a way of making a decision that certainly I thought was comforting.
What would you say were her greatest weaknesses?
Well, she had a style. No, I'm kidding. You know, what our strengths are our weaknesses. I did not see her waver much, so I'm not sure. Nothing quickly comes to mind, and I don't say that just to be, you know, a sycophant of the governor's. But I know she was criticized, but on different levels for different things. I did not experience anything that stands out.
We've clearly touched on this during this conversation, but did Governor Whitman make a difference as a woman for women?
Oh, clearly. Yeah, clearly.
Tell us how.
Well, she's the strongest governor in the country. She's running the state, and she did a bang-up job, in my opinion. You know, she came out early. She was fighting all established old boys kinds of procedures and expectations. And how can you, as a woman, especially a professional woman, not see that and see it as a role model? So, and she had, you know, she had a wonderful bearing and way about her. And, you know, she did sort of carry herself with a bit of that patrician air. But when you spoke with her, you spoke with her. You saw the person. So,
did it affect who held power inside and outside government during her tenure? So talk about inside first, then we'll talk a little bit about outside.
That she was a woman?
Yep.
Oh, I think she gave women opportunities out the wazoo, frankly, that wouldn't have had them prior to her coming in. You know, she made a very conscious effort while I was there to make sure that there were always, for any opening, qualified female candidates as well as men. And she had Judy Shaw as her chief of staff, so it was clear to me that they wanted to be sure not just on the gender issue, but diversity issue in general, you know. And the other thing about this governor that I didn't really directly touch on, Nancy, is that she didn't know me. And she put me in a very high-level position. There are many in the political world who would not do that. I hadn't paid my dues to her campaign. She would hire based on what she assessed to be ability. And she annoyed some people because she wouldn't just go to the list of the preferred Republican people to appoint. She would go, you know, it's very big tent. She's always spoken about that. But she was looking for quality and talent. And so she wasn't necessarily looking for Republicans.
What about women outside of government during her tenure?
Well, can it not help but open doors? I don't, you know, when I remember meeting, I was deputy chief of staff, and I had to have a meeting, which scared the heck out of me because I wasn't particularly prepared. I had to step in with some very, very powerful CEOs of Wall Street companies. And so I, you know, walk in there, and it's all men. And I had been used to that my whole career. I'd often be the only female. But I think, and I could see them, you know, visibly kind of jolt because they thought someone else was going to be running the meeting. And, you know, it's like anything else with time, but the more times you see women at the top, the more the world at large gets comfortable with that. So I think it has to help externally.
Did you face different expectations because of the governor's gender?
Not sure.
Well, were there different expectations because the governor was a woman? Did people have different expectations of you and of her?
Well, if anything, I think it was the vestiges of the male-dominated workforce, and I think people thought, oftentimes, even though they didn't say, that you'd be a pushover, you know, and so there's always, and that you would, you know, whether for the governor, it was whether it's who could get tickets to the governor's box at Meadowlands or whatever, you know, expectations of the general populace, but particularly men, that they'd get things the way they always had them. And so you just have to show them the error of that, of those ways.
From your perspective, give us an assessment of her administration as a whole.
It's interesting. We were not the usual cast of characters, I think, you know, just because she did reach out. So many key people in that administration were certainly not well-known names for government high-level positions. And so, to be honest, I think a lot of us were very new to it, green a bit, and had to mature into understanding. You have to become a team. You have to understand what it is this team, this administration, is trying to do. And that's probably true with any new team coming in. But I think with Governor Whitman, because she reached out so broadly to people relatively unknown in that world, that it was a challenge for us all to kind of gel, but we did.
You have continued to have a very interesting career since you left the commissioner's position. Tell us a little bit about it. I know you've had several different assignments, so why don't you start from tell us what you will about your different careers. And you clearly had an assignment during the Corzine administration, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay. When I left the state, I took a position running one of the trade associations statewide for healthcare. So I represented health plans, health insurance companies statewide. So that was that was quite a change, because number one, I was running this massive department, and then when you tend to run these trade associations, they tend to be very small staffing. So I would have all these ideas and have no one to delegate them to but myself. So that became daunting. But so I was representing health insurance, the industry, and that's the Uniteds and the Aetnas and the Horizons and all those companies. And I didn't know much about health insurance, even though I had a health insurance product, Medicaid, but that's for a very specific group of people. So I think what was interesting for me about that job, clearly the board of that association thought my credentials in human services would be very helpful, to the extent they painted a different face on the health insurance industry, which people tended to view as sort of the evil empire, right? And so, you know, I would go to meet with a legislator, and they'd say, well, Michele, we love you, but we hate your client, or something like that. But, you know, so it was trying to rebrand the industry a bit. And then, after kind of moving the chapters along, out of the blue one day, I got a phone call from Governor Corzine's office, a Democrat, and asking me if I was interested in running this time-limited commission that he had just signed an executive order to create, a commission on rationalizing health care. So after I picked myself up off the floor, because it made no sense to me, you know, a Democrat, and I don't know anything about this. I have no idea what this commission is, but of course I went in to meet with the governor, and I don't know if I actually vocalized it because I was trying to maintain some dignity, but so I had not met Governor Corzine prior to that. And he said, well, we're trying to rationalize health care. And I said or thought, well, isn't that an oxymoron? But it actually turned out to be a fascinating position. It was time limited, as I said, so it ran about 18 months. And the governor and his people, Corzine, had put together a commission of the most expert health economists in the country. And I got to sort of be the staff to that. So for me, it was like getting a graduate degree, you know, and I really liked it.
And tell us what your current position is.
So my current position is a lot easier than representing the health insurance industry, because I run Leading Age New Jersey, which is a statewide association that represents services and programs and facilities, all nonprofits. I'm back to my nonprofit, having gone full circle, a nonprofit serving seniors, so assisted living, nursing homes, hospice, all that kind of thing. And that's a lot easier to pitch to the legislature for than health insurance.
Is there anything about the Whitman administration you'd like to tell us that I may not have asked you?
I think my summary thought, I mean, I've tried to be completely candid and to acknowledge what I think really made her, for me, stand out and make her such a wonderful person to work for. I think she is undervalued today. You know, she went, as you know, to Washington and became DEP secretary. Was that the right DEA? Environmental Protection. Whatever.
Yeah, she was head of EPA.
EPA,
right,
yes,
right.
I was confusing the state position. And I think that was not an easy time for her, but it wasn't long after that a lot of problems seemed to rear their heads in terms of the state debt and other issues. And I think that her career politically was cut shorter than, in my opinion, it should have been. She had tremendous potential, and you know, life is about choices and the fates, and I just think that today she's not given her due.
Thank you very much, Michele. It was delightful talking to you.
It's always a pleasure, Nancy. Thank you.